The first thing I noticed wasn't the missing leg. It was the sound of metal hitting a hospital tray. Mark wouldn't look at me when he slid his wedding ring across the sterile surface. His voice shook, but his words cut clean. "I can't do this, Lauren." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Nurses passed by the door, their shoes squeaking on linoleum. Everything felt too bright, too loud, too real. I'd just woken from surgery 3 hours ago. The amputation site throbbed beneath layers of bandages. And my husband of 4 years was leaving me. He backed toward the door, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut, final as a coffin lid. I stared at that gold band spinning on the tray, thinking how something so small could echo so loud. My heart monitor beeped faster. A nurse rushed in, concerned. But I couldn't speak. Couldn't cry. I just kept staring at that ring, watching it settle into stillness while my entire world spun out of control. The room smelled like antiseptic and betrayal. The machines beeped their mechanical rhythm around me. Nurses moved through their routines with practiced efficiency. But the loudest sound in that room was silence. The absence where Mark's voice should have been. The empty chair where he should have sat, holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. Every breath hurt, but not from the surgery. This pain came from somewhere deeper, somewhere no medication could reach. I'd built my life around someone who couldn't stand to see me broken. We'd promised each other forever just 4 years ago. Through sickness and health. Better or worse. Apparently, his version of those vows had conditions printed in invisible ink. I pressed the call button, not because I needed anything medical. I just needed to hear another human voice. When the nurse arrived, I asked for water I didn't want. She brought it with a kind smile, and I nearly broke down. That small gesture of care felt like more than my husband had given me in our final moments together. As she left, I realized something terrifying. I was truly alone now, in a way I'd never been before. That night, morphine blurred the edges of reality. Pain meds made the ceiling swim above me. In the darkness, I whispered the truth out loud for the first time. He walked away when I needed him most. Saying it made it real, like carving words into stone. The tears came then, hot and bitter. They soaked into the thin hospital pillow until it was damp against my cheek. I cried until my chest ached, until the drugs pulled me under into uneasy sleep. Somewhere between consciousness and sleep, a thought flickered through the fog. If he could leave that easily, maybe I never really knew him. Maybe the man I'd loved was just a story I'd told myself. Maybe I'd been alone long before he walked out that door. The realization should have destroyed me. Instead, something small and fierce sparked in my chest. Anger. The kind that doesn't explode but burns slow and steady. The kind that forges steel. Tomorrow, I'd wake up missing a leg and a husband. But tonight I made a decision. I would survive this. And somehow, someway he would regret it. Before the accident, we were the couple everyone envied. We'd met in college, both studying architecture. Mark was charming, ambitious, quick with a joke that could light up a room. We'd remodeled our first home together, arguing over paint colors and laughing through the chaos of renovation. We talked about kids, about growing old together, about building a life as carefully as we design buildings. Mark used to tell me, "There's nothing we can't handle, Laure. We're a team." I'd believed him completely, never questioning those words. Funny how people promise forever until life actually tests the word. Now forever fit inside a single heartbeat and the slam of a hospital door. I thought about our wedding day, how he'd cried when I walked down the aisle. How he'd held my hand so tight and promised to never let go. But promises are just words. When the universe called his bluff, when life got messy and real and hard, those words dissolved like sugar in rain. The man I'd married would never have left me, which meant I'd married a stranger all along. The accident replayed in fragments whenever I closed my eyes. Rain hammering the windshield, headlights cutting through the dark, then swinging into the wrong lane without warning. The horrible screech of metal on metal. Then nothing but black silence. I woke in a white room, too bright, too cold, too sterile. A doctor with tired eyes told me I was lucky to be alive. Lucky. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. My left leg was gone below the knee, crushed beyond repair in the impact. They'd had to amputate to save my life, to stop infection from spreading. I remember asking about Mark through the fog of medication. The nurse had looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight. "He was here earlier," she'd said carefully. "He stepped out for air." That was code. I understood it even through the medication fog. He'd taken one look at me, at what I'd become, and he'd run. When he finally came back hours later, it was only to leave his ring and a handful of broken words. All I could think about was whether he'd stayed in the waiting room during surgery. Whether he'd paced and worried and prayed like I would have for him. I never got the answer. But his absence told me everything I needed to know. They wheeled me into the rehab center 2 weeks later. The walls were painted cheerful yellow, like happiness could be manufactured with the right shade of paint. I caught my reflection in a mirror as we passed through the corridor. Pale skin. Hollow eyes. A body that ended where it shouldn't. For one horrible second, I hated that woman staring back at me. Then I realized she was me, and hating her wouldn't help either of us survive this. My phone buzzed that afternoon while I was settling into my room. One text from Mark. "Take care of yourself." That was it. 4 words after 4 years of marriage. No calls. No visits. Just silence that screamed louder than any argument we'd ever had. That message did something to me. It snapped whatever thread of hope I'd been clinging to. I deleted his number. Blocked him on everything. If he wanted out of my life, I'd make it easy. I'd erase him completely, pretend he never existed. That was the day I stopped waiting for someone to save me. I was the only rescue coming, and I needed to accept that reality. The sooner I did, the sooner I could start rebuilding. Learning to use a prosthetic was like learning to walk all over again, except harder. Except this time, every step was a negotiation with pain and balance and gravity. I fell more times than I could count in those first weeks. Each bruise became a badge of honor. Each failure became fuel for the next attempt. The physical therapist, a woman named Marta with steel in her voice, never pitied me. She pushed hard, expected more, celebrated small victories with genuine joy. One night, alone in my room, I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise. If Mark couldn't love me broken, he'd live long enough to regret walking away. Not through screaming or revenge or hate. Through success. Through becoming someone so undeniably powerful that he'd see exactly what he'd thrown away. I wouldn't destroy him with anger. I'd simply become indestructible. And that would be enough. The anger that had sparked in the hospital was growing now. Banking into something stronger, something that could carry me forward when hope ran dry. I fell asleep that night with a strange kind of peace settling over me. The worst had already happened. Everything else was just work. The parallel bars gleamed under the harsh rehab lights. My therapist stood beside me, patient and steady as always. "One step, Lauren. Just one." I gripped the bars so hard my knuckles went white. My prosthetic felt foreign, heavy, wrong against my body. I shifted my weight carefully. The room tilted sideways. My balance vanished. I hit the mat hard, shoulder first, the impact rattling through my bones. The whole room froze. Other patients stopped their exercises to stare. In that moment I could have quit. Could have stayed down and let someone help me back to the chair. Instead I laughed. A cracked, slightly manic sound that surprised even me. Then I tried again, pulling myself up with shaking arms. The second fall hurt worse because I knew it was coming. But this time I stayed sitting upright, adjusting, learning, refusing to give up. That counted as progress. Marta grinned and squeezed my shoulder. "That's my girl." By the end of the week I could take 3 steps without falling. By the end of the month I could walk the length of the bars. Each step was a small rebellion against the universe that had tried to break me. Against the man who'd decided I wasn't worth staying for. Every step said, "I'm still here, still fighting." My first trip to a grocery store felt like climbing Everest. I'd practiced walking for weeks in the safe environment of rehab, but the real world was different. Uneven floors, crowds of people, the weight of strangers' stares following my every move. I grabbed a basket, determined to do this alone to prove I could. Mark's friend Jeff spotted me near the produce section. His face did that thing people's faces do when they don't know how to act around disability. Pity mixed with discomfort mixed with false cheer. "Lauren, wow, you're doing great. Considering." That last word hung in the air like a slap across my face. Considering what? Considering I should be dead. Considering I'm not whole anymore. Considering I'm less than I was before. I smiled so hard my jaw ached. Thanks, Jeff. Doing my best. Inside I was burning with shame and rage. When he left, I stood there shaking, gripping the basket handle. Then I bought a single apple. Just one. It was proof that I could still do something, anything, on my own terms. I carried that apple home like a trophy, like evidence of my independence. Later, I'd realize it was the first brick in rebuilding myself. Small things. One at a time. Until small things became big things. Until big things became everything I needed. I'd been an architect before the accident, and I wanted that life back desperately. I sent my portfolio to every firm in the city, polished and professional. Most didn't respond at all. The ones that did offered interviews out of politeness, not genuine interest. At Harrington Architecture, the hiring manager kept glancing at my prosthetic instead of my designs spread across his desk. I brought my best work. Clean lines. Innovative use of space. Award-winning concepts from before the accident. He barely looked at them, his eyes drifting back to my leg. Finally, he cleared his throat uncomfortably. "These are impressive, Lauren. But we're not sure this role would be physically suited to you. Lots of site visits. Climbing stairs. You understand." I understood perfectly. I was being rejected not for my skills but for my body. I thanked him politely and walked out with my head high, refusing to let him see me break. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and cried for exactly 60 seconds. Then I stopped. Made myself stop, wiping my eyes roughly. That was the last time I'd let anyone's pity break me. The last time I'd accept being told what I couldn't do. From now on, I'd show them instead. I'd prove every single person wrong. At physical therapy, another amputee named Tina complimented my outfit. I'd started dressing better, making an effort even when I didn't feel like it, even when getting dressed felt like running a marathon. She laughed and said, "You should design clothes that actually fit people like us. Everything's made for bodies that work the way they're supposed to." Something clicked in my brain. A spark of possibility I hadn't felt since before the accident. I hadn't drawn anything except buildings in years. But that night, I dug through boxes in my closet until I found my old sketchbook. The pages were yellowed, filled with fashion designs from my college days. Before I'd chosen architecture over art. Before I'd chosen practicality over passion. Before I'd let fear guide my decisions. I flipped to a blank page. My hand shook as I picked up a pencil, uncertain after so long. Then I started drawing. Pants with hidden zippers for prosthetics. Dresses that accommodated different body shapes. Clothes that made disability invisible or celebrated it, depending on the wearer's choice. For the first time since the accident, I felt something other than pain or anger. I felt purpose spreading warm through my chest. The pencil moved across paper until dawn broke outside my window. And for those few hours I wasn't broken. I was creating something new. I drew until coffee went cold and my hand cramped from gripping the pencil. Design after design covered the floor of my apartment. Adaptive clothing that looked fashionable, not medical. Pieces that gave people their dignity back, their confidence, their sense of self. Every sketch whispered the same message. You're still here. You still matter. You're still beautiful. I posted 3 designs online under an anonymous account, not using my real name. I didn't expect anything. Maybe a few likes from strangers scrolling past. maybe nothing at all. But when I woke up the next morning, 2 designs had sold. By evening, 20 orders had come through. Messages flooded my inbox from people I'd never met. I've been looking for something like this for years. This made me cry. Thank you for understanding. I haven't worn a dress since my accident. I just ordered 3. I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by sketches and sobbed. But these weren't tears of pain or grief or loss. They were relief, validation, proof that my life wasn't over, that I still had something to offer the world. It had just changed direction in ways I couldn't have predicted. The world hadn't ended, had simply changed shape. And maybe, just maybe, I could change with it. Maybe this was my second chance. A local investor named David Chen reached out after seeing my designs circulating online. He specialized in adaptive technology and accessible fashion. We met at a downtown cafe on a sunny afternoon. I was nervous, overdressed, trying too hard to seem professional and put together. But David shook my hand with genuine enthusiasm, no pity in his eyes. These designs are exactly what the market needs, he said, spreading my portfolio on the table. Let's talk about scaling this into a real brand. I almost laughed at the absurdity. A week ago, I couldn't get an architecture firm to hire me for any position. Now someone wanted to invest in my late-night sketches. What would you call it? David asked, leaning forward. I thought about everything I'd survived. The accident, the surgery, Mark leaving me in that hospital room, learning to walk again, falling and getting back up, crying in parking lots and grocery stores, building something new from the ruins of my old life. Unbroken, I said. The word felt right, powerful, true to who I was becoming. David smiled wide. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. We spent 3 hours discussing manufacturing, marketing, and launch strategies. When I left that cafe, I wasn't just a woman with a prosthetic leg anymore. I was a business owner, an entrepreneur, someone with a future I'd built myself. For the first time since the accident, I believed I might actually be okay. More than okay. The Unbroken launch event was held in a renovated art gallery downtown. We'd rented the space for one night, transforming it into a runway with lighting and music. Models of all abilities wore my designs. Amputees, wheelchair users, people with visible and invisible disabilities. Each one looked powerful, beautiful, unbroken in every sense of the word. I walked the runway last, wearing a design I'd made specifically for myself. Sleek black jumpsuit with strategic cutouts. My prosthetic on full display, not hidden but celebrated as part of who I was. The cameras flashed like lightning. People whispered behind their hands. I heard someone say, "That's her? The woman who lost her leg in that horrible accident." The woman who lost her leg. And found herself in the process. The applause was deafening, washing over me in waves. By morning, every fashion blog and disability advocacy site had covered the event. My inbox exploded with interview requests from magazines and podcasts. Unbroken wasn't just a brand anymore. It was a movement, something bigger than myself. I'd gone from rejected architect to overnight fashion success in the span of 6 months. And somewhere out there, I knew Mark had seen the headlines. I hoped it hurt. I hoped he understood exactly what he'd walked away from. I hoped he lay awake at night thinking about it. Fame came with noise, both good and bad. Online comments ranged from supportive to cruel. She's just milking her tragedy for attention and profit. Pity fashion. Won't last a year. Using disability as a marketing gimmick. Disgusting. The hate stung at first, cutting deep into my confidence. Then I learned to filter it out, focusing instead on the messages that actually mattered. Because of you, I wore shorts for the first time in 3 years. My daughter saw your show and stopped hiding her prosthetic. You made me feel beautiful again when I thought that was impossible. Those words were armor against the trolls and critics. Every nasty comment was outnumbered by 10 messages of gratitude from real people whose lives had changed. I printed some of them out and hung them in my office on a bulletin board. On hard days, when doubt crept in and whispered that I wasn't good enough, I'd read them and remember why I was doing this. Not for revenge against Mark. Not even for myself anymore. For every person who'd been told they were less than whole. For everyone society had tried to make invisible or pushed to the margins. If Unbroken could give them even a fraction of their power back, the hate comments were just background noise. Nothing more than static I could tune out. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. But I recognized it immediately even though I deleted it. Mark. Saw your interview on Channel 7. Proud of you. I stared at those words until they blurred together. Proud. Now he was proud of me. Not when I was struggling in the hospital, fighting for my life. Not when I was learning to walk again, falling over and over. Not when I was being rejected from jobs because of my disability. Now that I was successful, now that I'd made something of myself without him, suddenly he remembered I existed. I didn't reply. I turned the phone face down on my nightstand and whispered to the empty room. Now you remember me. The anger I'd been carrying shifted into something colder. Something more dangerous and controlled. I didn't want his pride. Didn't want his approval or his regret or his validation. I wanted him to understand, really understand deep in his bones, what he'd thrown away. And I wanted him to live with that knowledge every single day for the rest of his life. I blocked the number without responding, my fingers steady. If Mark wanted back into my life, he'd have to do a lot more than send a text. He'd have to earn it. And I wasn't sure that was even possible anymore. Some things couldn't be forgiven. 2 weeks later, an email arrived from the Elite Business Gala. They wanted me as a guest speaker at their annual event. The gala was exclusive, high-profile, attended by the city's most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders. I almost declined, thinking I wasn't ready for that level of exposure. Then I saw the sponsor list. Harrington Architecture. Mark's company. The same company that had rejected me 6 months ago, told me I wasn't physically suited for architecture work. The irony was so sharp it cut. They wanted me to speak at an event they were sponsoring. They'd rejected me as an employee but now wanted me as inspiration, as a feel-good story. I accepted immediately, typing the response with a smile. Not because I wanted to see Mark or reconnect with him, but because I wanted him to see me. To understand exactly what his company had lost when they dismissed me so casually. To watch me succeed in the space where I'd once failed so publicly. I started writing my speech that night at my kitchen table. Every word was chosen carefully, precisely. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. About showing the world, and Mark, who I'd become. The woman he'd left broken had rebuilt herself into someone extraordinary. And he was going to watch it happen from the front row, unable to look away. The night of the gala, I wore emerald green. A custom design from my newest collection, one of my favorite pieces. The dress was cut to showcase my prosthetic leg, turning it into a piece of art rather than something to hide away in shame. I'd covered it in custom metalwork that caught the light with every step, making it impossible to ignore. I arrived alone, chin high, heart pounding against my ribs. The venue was stunning. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors. The city's elite mingling with champagne and small talk about stocks and real estate. I saw Mark before he saw me. He was mid-conversation with a younger woman, probably his new girlfriend. Laughing at something she'd said. Looking comfortable. Happy. Like he'd moved on completely. Then he turned and our eyes met across the crowded room. He froze. Actually froze mid-sentence, mouth still half open. His date looked confused, following his gaze. I walked straight toward them, my prosthetic clicking softly against marble with each measured step. "Mark," I said, smiling politely like we were old acquaintances. "It's been a while." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Lauren. You look incredible." I tilted my head slightly, letting the moment hang. "Thank you. You left me at my lowest. Turns out that was your biggest mistake." The nearby conversations stopped. People turned to stare. and I walked past him toward the stage, leaving him standing there with the weight of those words and everyone's eyes on him. I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight was blinding hot, exactly like I'd imagined it would be. Mark sat in the front row, his date beside him looking uncomfortable. He was trying to look composed, but his hands were shaking. I could see them from where I stood at the podium. I took a breath and began speaking. 2 years ago I lost everything. My job, my mobility, my husband. Pause. Let that sink in, let people absorb it. But sometimes, losing everything is how you learn what's truly yours. The room was silent, every person leaning forward captivated. Pain didn't break me, I continued, my voice steady and strong. It rebuilt me. It showed me that I was never the weak one in my marriage. I was never the one who couldn't handle hard things. I was just the one who had to learn that lesson alone. I told them about the hospital, about learning to walk, about being rejected from jobs, including from companies in this very room, about finding my purpose in designing for people society forgot or overlooked. The applause started slow, then built like thunder rolling across the room. People stood. Mark clapped too because everyone was watching and not clapping would be noticed. But his eyes were wet and his face had gone pale. I'd done what I came to do. I'd shown him exactly who I was. And exactly what he'd lost when he walked out of that hospital room. After that night, investors lined up outside my office door. Unbroken expanded from online sales to retail partnerships with major chains. Major department stores wanted to carry our designs on their floors. Magazines called for features and cover stories. I hired a team of talented designers and business managers. Tina from Physical Therapy became my head designer, bringing fresh perspective. We moved into a real office space, not just my cramped apartment. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual friends that Mark's firm was struggling badly. They'd lost several major contracts. Clients were going elsewhere, choosing other firms. One of those contracts had been offered to me instead. A major adaptive design project for a new community center downtown. The irony was poetic, almost too perfect to be real. Mark's company had rejected me for being disabled. Now they were losing business to my company that celebrated disability as strength. He called one afternoon while I was in a meeting. I almost didn't answer the unknown number. "Lauren," he said, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. "I know I don't deserve to ask, but maybe we could collaborate. My firm and Unbroken." I smiled even though he couldn't see it. "Sorry, Mark. I only work with partners who stay when things get hard." Then I hung up. Cleanly. The way he should have done if he'd had any courage at all 2 years ago. Months passed in a blur of success. Unbroken became a national name, recognized across the country. We opened 3 brick-and-mortar stores in major cities. I appeared on morning shows and podcasts, telling my story over and over. My designs were worn by athletes, celebrities, and everyday people who just wanted to feel powerful again. I heard through the grapevine that Mark's big investor pulled out after we announced an architectural partnership. We were designing an entire adaptive fashion headquarters, a building that would showcase accessibility. The same project his firm had been banking their entire future on. He'd once mocked my fashion sketches, calling them a hobby that would never amount to anything. Now my name was printed on the same skyline his company had lost. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to celebrate his failure. The universe had a way of balancing scales without my help. Success was the best revenge because it required no malice. I simply focused on building something meaningful, on creating clothes that gave people their confidence back, on proving that disability didn't mean inability. And in doing so, I'd accidentally destroyed the man who'd left me. Not through anger or spite, through indifference, through becoming someone who didn't need him anymore, through becoming someone he couldn't reach even if he tried with everything he had. I saw Mark again outside a downtown cafe 6 months later. Pure coincidence, not planned. He looked tired. Suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't been sleeping well for weeks. He tried to smile when he saw me walking toward him. Came out crooked, desperate, sad. "Lauren, I'm sorry." 2 words he should have said 2 years ago in that hospital room. I stopped walking. Looked at him properly for the first time in months. "I know you are," I said quietly, meaning it. He looked like he wanted to say more. To explain himself. To justify his actions. To somehow make it right between us. But we both knew some things couldn't be fixed. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. I'd spent 2 years rebuilding myself from nothing. Learning to walk again. Learning to love myself again. Creating a life that mattered to people. He'd spent those same 2 years realizing what he'd thrown away, what he'd lost. "Take care, Mark," I said. Not angry. Not bitter. Just done with this chapter. I turned toward the street and walked away on steady legs. My gait was confident now. The prosthetic no longer felt foreign but like part of me. Something that made me stronger, not weaker than I was before. He watched me go. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see there. Only the ghost of who I used to be before I learned my own strength, before I discovered who I really was. Unbroken opened its first adaptive design studio the following spring. The space was beautiful, exactly what I dreamed. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Bright workspace filled with natural light. A team of designers from every background imaginable working together. Tina led the design team with fierce creativity and compassion. We'd hired people the fashion world had overlooked or rejected. Disabled designers. People who understood firsthand what our customers needed. On opening day, I stood in the center of that studio and felt something close to peace wash over me. This was what surviving looked like. Not just getting through the day but building something meaningful from the wreckage of your old life. We hung a framed quote on the wall in bold letters. "She lost a leg, not her power." People asked who said it, wanting to know the source. I just smiled and told them it came from experience, from living it. That night, I drove past Mark's old office building downtown. The building was dark, mostly empty. His firm had downsized, moved to a smaller location across town. I felt nothing looking at it. No satisfaction. No anger. Just a strange sort of closure settling in my chest. My story wasn't about him anymore. It never really had been, I realized. It was about me. About learning that I was whole all by myself. That I didn't need someone else to complete me or validate my worth. A year later, Unbroken was worth millions of dollars. We'd expanded internationally to Europe and Asia. Fashion weeks in Paris and Milan featured our designs on runways. I stood backstage at a show in New York, watching models walk in clothes I'd sketched alone in a dark apartment during my lowest moments. Somewhere in the audience, I knew there were people wearing prosthetics, using wheelchairs, living with invisible disabilities. People who finally saw themselves represented in high fashion. People who finally felt beautiful and powerful. That was worth more than any revenge. More than Mark's regret or his company's failure. This impact, this change, this visibility for people like me. One of the models, a bilateral amputee named Sarah, hugged me backstage after her walk. "You changed my life," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Hugged her back, my own tears flowing freely. "You changed mine too," I said. Because that was the truth. All of them had changed me. Every person who'd reached out, who'd shared their story, who'd worn my designs and reclaimed their power. They'd saved me as much as I'd tried to help them. We'd saved each other in ways that couldn't be measured. And that was better than any revenge story could ever be. This was about healing, not hurting. About building up, not tearing down. On the 2nd anniversary of the accident, I visited the hospital where everything had changed. I brought flowers for the nurses who'd cared for me. Who'd seen me at my lowest and treated me with dignity and kindness. They cried when they saw me walking through the doors. Hugged me tight. Told me they'd been following my journey online. One nurse pulled out her phone and showed me her daughter wearing an unbroken dress. "She has cerebral palsy," the nurse explained, her voice shaking. She never wanted to wear dresses before. said they didn't fit right, made her feel awkward. But yours do. She feels beautiful now. Cried then. Happy tears. Grateful tears for this moment. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror in my apartment. Really looked at every detail. At the scars crisscrossing my skin. The prosthetic that had become part of me. The body I'd learned to love again despite everything. And I smiled. Mark had left me because he thought I was broken beyond repair. But I'd never been broken. Just unfinished, still becoming who I was meant to be. The accident hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed who I really was underneath all the expectations and fears. Someone strong. Someone capable. Someone who could turn pain into purpose and help others do the same. If Mark ever sees my face on a billboard again, I hope he remembers everything. Not the woman he left behind in that hospital room, but the woman who proved she never needed him to be whole, to be powerful, to be successful and happy.